Now what we're going to do, so we've looked at edges, we've looked at policy groups, we've looked at zones. Now the other key area of the management console that we need to look at now is assets. All right. So we're going to filter this out a little bit and get some of the extraneous information off the screen again. The filters are your friends, by the way. The filters are always your friends. So what we can see here is, and we're going to pay particular attention to this grouping right here, we can see the 10.20.40.9 BIOS IP address, or again, in routing terminology, the gateway, right? We can see that that BIOS IP address is representative of what? The camera and the switch within that zone. So if I jump back to that slide again, we can see there's the 10.20.40.9 address, and here's the switch and the camera that are being protected by the BIOS environment. So looking across the screen here now, as we've expanded those two devices, we can see that BIOS, and this is what Ryan was just alluding to, we could see that BIOS has discovered a bunch of open ports and protocols or resources, right? So we can see for the camera, and let's be honest, the camera's not very sophisticated. We could see that the camera's got port 80, it had port 554, and it had port 1935 open. We could see that the switch had port 22 for SSH, port 80, and port 443 open. So what BIOS did is it discovered these open ports and immediately locked them down. So no traffic can be sent from those ports out of the microsegment or be sent to those ports into the microsegment. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you real quickly. We're going to stop at the slide. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring up this laptop, which is a Windows machine. And that laptop, as you can see, is local to that switch. All right. So I'm going to show you here how I'm logged in locally to that switch, that 10.10.4.47, right? If I jump back to the slide, there's 10.10.4.47, right? And I can show you how I can log into that camera as well, locally, 10.10.4.72, right? So if I want to log into that switch, I am now locally logged into that switch. I have full management access via port 443, but I can only access it from inside of that microsegment. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over to we'll stop at the slide. We should always stop at the slide. Now what I'm going to do is jump over to this laptop, which is a Mac, and I'm going to try to access that switch again, but this time I'm going to have to access it via 10.20.40.9. Again, I want you to conceptualize a traditional routing environment with how MAC addresses change, IP addresses change, depending on which subnet or segment you're attached to. So by jumping over here and trying to access that switch, you can see I'm accessing 10.20.40.9 right here. But in reality, this site can't be reached. Why can't this site be reached? Well, we showed you with the policy groups, I have the proper layer 2 access. We showed you with zones, I have the proper layer 3 access, right? If we jump back to the slide, lab 1 zone is allowed to talk to lab 2 zone, and lab 2 zone is allowed to talk to lab 1 zone. So layers 2 and 3 are set. I can talk to them at layer 2 and 3. But in reality, until we open up that securely locked down port, I have no access to this switch. So let's go back to the management console, and let's go to the switch, and let's enable that port 443. And while we're at it, you'll see the resources updated. And while we're at it, let's enable port 80 on the camera. Okay, so let's try and access that switch again. Now you can see that via 10.20.40.9, I've now got remote access to that switch.